Okay, we are blurry, I guess. What is up with that? I'm guessing that's not actually the camera. Do I have something that can... Is there just something in the lens? On the lens? Should I just Maybe I should, I'm supposed to be down here anyway. Oh, that's terrible. Should I just reset the webcam? Let's do that. Let's do one of those. Oh, look at that. Genius. Absolutely genius. Okay, well, maybe it was still zoomed in or focused on what was behind me. But do we not have a title right now? What's going on here? The stream preview shows nothing. What is happening here? I am just chatting. Okay. But I don't have a thumbnail? What is going on? Oh no, is this this isn't live? Everything's gone awry. And then it ends. Is there a different one? Okay, so this looks good. Are we live? Are we actually good now? It still doesn't show a preview of my title on my screen, which is very different than normal. And it doesn't know that I'm just chatting. Oh, what's going on? Why? It says just chatting here. And then if I click on this, videos. I don't know. Maybe let's just continue and see what happens. Yeah, we really want one of these thumbnails. I think that like is really important for getting just random people to click on the channel. So it is a shame. But let's just ride. And we want to go a little faster. So I think this is going to be Dr. K reacting to the video we just kind of saw, and so I'm kind of curious what he says about it, given all the takes, all the speculations I made. And we've got, okay, we got that there. All right. Yeah, this thing's still not updating with my... Oh, it says it's unstable, that's why. Huh. So if it keeps dropping, then we'll have to do something about that. Maybe Restream itself just has terrible health. And maybe that's something we're going to just need to consider. All right, well, let's go.
Chat. I was recently lucky enough to be invited to Diary of a CEO's podcast on meaning and purpose. And it was great. It was awesome. I was with two philosophers, and I had a lot to say about meaning and purpose, but I ran into a couple of problems. I was with a Christian and an atheist, which means they got into a discussion about things that I thought weren't super relevant to meaning or purpose.
That right. God is in the process of solving the problem of evil over time.
I mean, the explanation for why the evil's there in the first place. You said the fall.
The second is that I was with a group of philosophers, and following what they said was actually kind of hard for me. I'm not really a philosopher.
So how is it that this mystery of consciousness, which contains propositional thoughts, ideas, and purposes, if consciousness can't be explained that Darwinian way, how can some characterization of molecules in motion accomplish that same end. That's my concern.
So what I wanted to do today is justify some of the claims that I made and lay out my general hypothesis that there is an evidence-based approach to finding meaning and purpose in your life.
So for me, finding meaning and purpose is like a very practical thing.
So the first thing we have to understand about purpose is, how do you know you have purpose or don't have purpose in life? I know it sounds kind of weird, but purpose, a sense of purpose or meaning in your life, is something that is internally felt. Okay, this is the first thing to understand. So if I go to you and I ask, hey, do you have meaning or purpose in life? You are going to say yes or no or maybe, but the data that you're using is going to be internal. It doesn't necessarily mean, like, I've met so many people who have careers, have families, have kids, and yet they feel like they don't have purpose. And I've met other people who don't have careers, don't have family, even people who are homeless or in jail, who feel like they have purpose in life. So the first thing to understand is, from a scientific perspective, purpose is something that is internally felt. It is not directly correlated to something external in your life, like how much money you make, whether you get laid.
So I'm glad that he's being authoritative about this. This is something that I always kind of feel weird saying, because I imagine people don't have that intuition, or a lot of people might not have that intuition. But the whole point of going into the exploration of how we experience and understand the world kind of sets us up for that. Oh, when I keep doing this, I guess the whole thing shakes. That's terrible. Maybe I need to get a nicer monitor on the right here. Maybe we'll get that. I also have to watch how many uhs I say. I noticed now that I'm editing my own videos that I do say quite a lot. I kind of leverage that as a communication tool. But if we really pay attention, maybe we can not say So we're definitely lining up with what Dr. K is saying here.
Laid, etc. Okay? Second thing that's really confusing. Purpose is something that is quantifiable. So if I were to ask you, do you have purpose in life? You may say yes, you may say no, but the majority of people out there will say something besides yes or no. They'll say, like, yeah, I feel like I've got some purpose over here, but it's not like 100%, which kind of makes sense, right? That's what everyone sort of feels. And so this is what's really interesting. Purpose is something that is quantifiable. So we can measure the percentage of purpose in your life, okay? So third thing that I'm going to say.
I feel like he didn't give a sufficient explanation of that point. Quantifiable. I wonder if, when he says that, is he referring to, something we could measure empirically in the brain, or are we talking about literally we're getting the feedback, which is, I feel purpose because of this, I can explain why my life feels meaningful, therefore it's I would almost say that's like qualifiable, but because it's not something you quantify. It's like how many words I've used, how much conviction I have towards what I say, how many reasons that's not quantifiable. So I would if I was in the conversation, I would ask him if we could get more precise about that one.
Purpose is not something that you find, because the way that we talk about purpose, we're like, yeah, I found my purpose in life. We make it seem binary, which it's not. And we also make it seem like it is something that comes from outside of us. Like, I'm walking down the street, I try this thing, and then I try this thing, and then I go to this place, and I go to this place. And if I try hard enough, if I look hard enough, if I watch enough YouTube videos, I will find my purpose. That's not how it happens. Purpose is internally crafted through a series of actions. Okay.
So I get the point that he's making there, but I feel like we lose something if we lose the idea of find. It could still be an internally crafted thing that isn't external, but you could still look for it. You could still find that within yourself, or within the relationship you have with your conscience, or your goals, or your freedom, however you want to spin that. But the notion of finding, I think, is actually quite beneficial to keep. So I imagine we could, there could be a little bit of a give and take there.
Okay, what are those actions? This is where the first thing that we're going to go into is something called...
This is what we want to... Oh, okay, so he's going to go into the same things that he said last time. So I'm going to just be ready with my notes here.
self-determination theory. So this is a theory that was developed that basically talks about how people get a sense of purpose and direction in life. It's a theory that's maybe 30 years old, maybe longer, and there's been a ton of research into it where people have basically figured out, if you take a group of people who feel like they have purpose in life, what do they do that evokes that internal feeling of, yes, I have direction? And then if we take people who do not have purpose and direction in life, what is their life like? And here's what self-determination theory shows us. The first is that people who have a sense of purpose make choices. People who don't have a sense of purpose have choices made to them. So people who make choices in life have a sense of direction, have a sense of meaning. And
this might be a larger point that covers the three things he mentioned. The stretching of competence and the sense of relatedness might all be under this one
If we look at kind of the Venn diagram of meaning in life, purpose in life, direction in life, those are going to overlap a fair bit, which is part of what the research tells us, right? So if I ask someone, hey, do you have meaning in life? If they say yes, if I ask them another question, do you have direction in life? They will probably also say yes. So what this sort of means is that these three concepts, meaning, purpose, and direction, all relate to one thing that we feel within us. So then the question becomes, how do we evoke that thing? The first thing is making choices. And so this is what's really crazy, is that a lot of times when people lack purpose, they have this kind of thought, which is, which choice should I make? What is the right choice or the wrong choice? But I want you all to really think about this for a second, okay? So if I'm thinking about what is the right choice versus the wrong choice, I am not making the choice. What makes a choice right or wrong? Usually what the world tells me, should I study this or should I study this? Well, this one will get you a better job with more money. This one will get you a worse job with less money. So who is really making that decision? It sort of feels like ultimately you will choose the thing, but which thing you choose is not determined by you, right? You're making the choice based on what the rest of the world is going to offer you. So one of the huge problems that people who feel directionless or lack meaning in their life, one of the main reasons that they struggle is because they are constantly looking to the outside world to tell them what the right answer is. So what self-determination theory tells us is that if you start to make choices, it doesn't matter what choice you make, but you make a choice for yourself. It can be something as simple as, I'm going to drink this, or I'm going to drink this. I'm going to go for a hike because I feel like it. I'm going to read this book because I'm excited about it. This is where we're not focused on the external value of our actions, but we are going to exercise some self-control in terms of like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to make my life the way that I want it. Now, when you start to make those choices, something really cool happens. Your internal sense of control, direction, and purpose in life will increase. The second aspect of self-determination theory is stretching your capacity. So if we look at someone who feels meaningless in life, doesn't have any meaning, what they're usually doing is trying to play life with increase. The second aspect of self-determination theory is stretching your capacity. So if we look at someone who feels meaningless in life, doesn't have any meaning, what they're usually doing is trying to play life with minimum effort. They're playing this very like efficiency-oriented life where like, I'm going to work as little as I can to not get fired. I'm going to work as little as I can to get promoted. There's a capitalist system and everyone is milking me. I want my life to be simple so that I can be lazy and spend my whole time watching self-help videos on the internet, right? This is how we live life because we feel so burnt out. We feel so despairing. We feel like things aren't going well. And so we don't usually push ourselves. What we find from self-determination theory is that people who have a sense of meaning and purpose in life stretch their capacities. So I have this idea of what I'm capable of. And if I live within the frame of my capabilities, then who I am and what I'm capable of never changes, right? If
This is actually, oh man, we got to write this all down because this is aligning with how we've tried to discuss self-identity.
their capacities. So I have this idea of what I'm capable of. And if I live within the frame of my capabilities, then who I am and what I'm capable of never changes, right? If I never commit to trying something, idea of what I'm capable of. And if I live within the frame of my capabilities, then who I am and what I'm capable of never changes, right? If I never commit to trying something beyond what I'm capable of, if I always play it safe and play it easy, my confidence in myself will never improve. Whereas when I stretch my capacities, when I try to do something that I don't think I'm capable of, or I'm not sure I'm capable of, that does a couple of really amazing things internally and psychologically. So keep in mind, we're not focused on what happens externally, whether you win or you lose or whatever. So when you stretch your capacities, even if you fail, you are still leveling up, right? So if I go to the gym, where does the growth...
We aren't focused on the external outcomes. So let's...
capacities, even if you fail. Keep in mind, we're not focused on what happens externally, whether you win or you lose or whatever. So when you stretch your capacities, even if you fail, you are still leveling up, right? So if I go to the gym, where does the growth happen? If I lift light weights and never stress myself, what actually happens to my muscle tissue? It's not going to tear, it's not going to be stressed, and I won't get muscular hypertrophy. We know this from a stance of muscular growth, right? You have to push yourself in order to get stronger. And it turns out that our sense of self-esteem is exactly the same way. So if we stretch our capacities, so for example, if you say like, okay, I want to work out once a week because that's what I'm capable of. If you stretch yourself and you say, okay, let's shoot for 2 times a week. If you say, okay, I need to wake up at 7 a.m., but let me try to wake up at 6:30. This is the really interesting thing. The action that you take is not what's important. What self-determination theory tells us is whatever you are capable of, push yourself a little bit more. Now, when you push yourself, a couple of cool things happen because sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. Even if you lose, if you handle it in kind of the right way, and this is where things get tricky because sometimes this can trigger like rumination and thought spirals and oh my God, I should have never tried in the first place. That's for a different day. But most of the time what happens is sometimes even if you fail, you're like, man, like at least I tried, right? I'm not someone who's living life on the sidelines. I gave it a shot. I took control of my life. I lived with some direction. I made an attempt. And actually what's really cool is that most of the time we'll find that we actually did a little bit better than we expected. So if we stretch our capacities, it will increase our internal sense of direction, meaning, and purpose. The third thing that we're going to talk about is relatedness. So relatedness is actually the really hard one because relatedness is the one thing that you can't do on your own. The first two you can do on your own. But what we know is that human beings are communal creatures. And a sense of meaning, purpose, and direction involves being your authentic self. And once you are your authentic self, having someone recognize that, see that, and respond to that. Now, in today's world where there's, people are ghosting each other, people are very replaceable. Like we have AI applications and AI, job review by like HR at a company. Like it's hard to be seen in today's world. So this related piece is really, really difficult. So that's something that we have a bunch of stuff on the channel about socializing and connecting with people and being your authentic self. That is a third component that I think it's hard for you to sort of do on your own sitting at home, okay? The fourth thing that we're going to talk about moves beyond self-determination theory, draws on another set of science, and that's what's so cool about this is it's not just one theory, we have a lot of different information. So basically, if you look at people who have purpose, they feel in control, right? So what that means is people who don't have purpose feel out of control. Now we're going to talk a little bit about how the brain perceives whether you are in control of your life or out of control of your life. And this is
how the brain perceives whether you are in or out of control. Now, I think this is going to relate to the stuff that he was talking about in terms of how well we are attuned with our internal states, which I guess kind of fits in the homeostasis discussion. Your brain's going to punish you for not being attuned to your internal states. That kind of makes sense. Yeah, I don't think Damasio goes that far as to, imagine you try to do things that make it so that it's more difficult for you to get the internal signals telling you, hey, something needs to happen. And when I say that, it's not only signals that are noticeable, but signals that even when you aren't like noticing them explicitly, your brain is able to do things about solving the problem. But we'll see.
This is where we talk about something called passive challenges and active challenges. So a passive challenge is a challenge that you have to deal with that you did not choose. And what most people's experience of life is that there's a ton of passive challenges. I've got this stuff going on at work. I didn't want to do this. This person actually dumped me recently. Now I have to figure out where I'm going to be living because I have to move out. I have to pay taxes. My toilet got clogged. So as you go through life, if you feel like you lack meaning or purpose,
like
basically what's happening is life is happening to you. You are not living life. Life is just coming at you from all directions and you feel overwhelmed. The research on active and passive challenges actually comes from really feeling overwhelmed and the research on anxiety, okay? Now here's the important thing to understand. An active challenge is something that is difficult that you choose to do. So I'm gonna run a marathon, even I'm gonna clean my sink every single day before I go to bed. It is something that you choose to take on that is difficult. Now here's the really counterintuitive thing. Our sense of control in life is not based on the total number of challenges that we face, right? If life is happening to you, the last thing that you feel like doing, if everything is falling apart around you, the last thing that you feel like doing is taking on an additional challenge. What most of us want to do is we want life to leave us alone. I'm going to ghost this person. I'm going to peace out of this job. I'm going to just sit at home. I want life to stop throwing stuff my way, right? We want to reduce the number of passive challenges. Our sense of control is a very simple ratio of active challenges to passive challenges. It's not the absolute number of things that you're dealing with. It is the ratio of things that you choose to things that you don't choose. And this is where people get really tripped up because if I have 4 things that I don't want to deal with, I think the way to gain control of my life is to get rid of 2 of them, right? And that means that basically like the passive challenges have been cut in half. Now I have more control, but that's not actually, the whole problem is that you can't really control that because life doesn't stop happening. Even if you stop trying to live life, stuff piles up, right? If you quit your job because you don't want to deal with your boss, now you're dipping into savings, now you're gonna have to polish up your resume, now you have a gap in your resume, now you have to go look for a job. So every time we try to retreat from the passive challenges in life, we tend to create more passive challenges for us down the road. And then this feels overwhelming because I was dealing with 4 things, I reduced 2 of them, now I'm dealing with 6 things, I reduced 2 of them, now I'm dealing with 8 things, and so life keeps piling up. If you listen to people who got their shit together, myself included, you can take a look at basically anyone, like listen to any interview where someone got their shit together, and what you will notice is that there is a point in their life where they chose to take on more, okay? So when life is coming at you, you look at your life, you say, everything is falling apart. All right, I'm gonna start going to the gym every day. I'm gonna start lifting every day. I'm gonna read 1 hour of like some kind of meditative book or self-help book or read about stoicism. I'm gonna take control of my life. That is taking on an active challenge. And the cool thing is that this is the part that you control. You don't control what life does to you. This has a cascading effect because if I have 4 passive challenges, and let's say there's one thing that I'm doing, but I say, okay, I'm gonna start going to the gym today. I'm gonna start meditating every single day. These are things that I am choosing to take on. Suddenly, this ratio is now better. And if the ratio is better, my perception of control, because this is just how the brain makes calculations, it doesn't care about the absolute level of control. It cares about the number of things that you choose to do compared to the number of things that happen to you. This gives you a greater sense of control. Once you have a greater sense of control, you become less pessimistic, you feel more empowered, and then here's the really cool thing. Once your brain feels confident and empowered, it is way easier to actually deal with the passive challenges. And this is basically how someone gets their life together, right? So I was failing out of college, joined a fraternity, trying to date people and not really working, not at all. Right? And then like I got my shit together. I started taking on more stuff. I was like, I'm gonna become a monk. I'm gonna travel to India. I'm gonna do this really hard meditation practice. I'm gonna do all these, like I'm gonna get my shit together. I'm gonna try to go to medical school. That's a goal that I'm taking on. I don't care if I fail. 40 rejections, 80 rejections, 3 years in a row, like doesn't really matter. This is what I'm gonna do. This is literally how you take control. We'll flip a switch in your brain. Next thing that we're gonna talk about. So when I showed up on the internet about 6 years ago and started live streaming, I noticed that people struggled with all of this stuff. People felt directionless. People felt like they had no control in life. You know, they had no meaning. They had no purpose. They struggled a lot with addiction. So I started out focusing on a video game addiction. And what we find is that basically a core vulnerability of all addictions is a lack of purpose and meaning in life. If you have no reason, no really good reason to deal with the withdrawal of a heroin addiction.
Oh, this is actually so tough because in part 2 we were going to talk about addiction, but if a solution to addiction is what we're going to be doing in part 3, then I don't know if addiction makes sense to be in part 2. I guess so. We could still just mention, hey, like a solution is getting a sense of purpose and meaning in your life, and we will discuss that in the next part and just leave it there. And I feel like this is still getting off of focus, but maybe that's just how bad this camera usually is. It's still significantly much nicer than what we used to have going on here. Unless it reset, I should always just check, just to be certain. No, it seems like it's 1080. Seems like it can go a little higher than that. Nope, we are gone. We've disappeared. Maybe we're capped. Seems like we're capped. Can we go up? No, we can't go higher than 30 FPS. Eventually, I'll probably want to try to get a nicer camera going on here. I think we're chilling with the mic. But, all right, let's keep going.
Or get your ass out of bed and actually not jerk off, right? You have to have like a reason. You have to have something in life that pulls you away from dopaminergic and hedonistic activities. So that was my goal, is like I'm trying to help people, you know, who have all of these new age problems. So these are technology addictions, amotivation, I don't feel like doing anything, burnout, imposter syndrome. There's all this stuff that people are dealing with. So I showed up on the internet and I did a bunch of research, right? So I read a bunch of things and I tried to figure out, okay, how do I help these people? So a big part of what we do on this channel is teach these principles, and we're going to teach y'all a couple of practical things that you can do. But this is also literally why I developed a coaching program. So what I did is I looked at all of these problems, and then I thought, okay, how do I help these people? And there's a certain amount of watching stuff on the internet that helps people, but I'm a psychiatrist. What I've seen is that when patients come into my office and I work with them in a dedicated way, they get better. And as I started teaching, right, these principles, what I found was that people ran into problems. So most common problem is they're conflicted. So yeah, I do want to meditate every day, but I don't feel like it. I do want to go to the gym. I want to stretch my capacities, but I feel embarrassed. Second thing that we ran into related to this is that they have a lot of emotional blocks, right? So like I can say, stretch your capacities and make choices. Start to take on active challenges. Take on more. Set boundaries. Set limits if they fall. Oh my God.
that's the first time I've heard that one.
Just be yourself. But when human beings try to implement what someone on the internet tells them to do, they run into their internal environment. They run into anxiety, they run into depression, they run into difficulty getting out of bed. So there's like this emotional problem that like gets in the way, right? So I'm really, really lonely, but when I go hang out with people, I'm socially anxious, and then I feel like leaving. So like, how do I fix this problem? Okay? So they're conflicted, and they run into emotional difficulties. And then the third thing that tends to happen is that their ability to frame goals and follow through with goals is really problematic. And the reason for this is that sometimes we'll develop goals based on how we feel in the moment. Like, so I remember when I was failing out of college, I was like, in the first 2 weeks of a class, if I wasn't sure I was going to get an A, I would just drop the class, right? Because I got an F. The only way to compensate is to get an A. But if I got an F, getting an A is like really hard. So how do I move from an F to an A? So this is what's really interesting is what I need to do, right? So the real way to do it is like, I need to go from an F to a C, and then a C to a B, and then a B to an A. That's like literally how progress happens. But we formulate all of these goals from the wrong places, and if we formulate them from the wrong places, we end up lacking the follow through to actually achieve them. And that just digs us in the pit even more. So I was looking at all these problems, looking at video game addiction, and I was like, okay, so videos on the internet are not sufficient. Do they help people? Absolutely. But can I teach human beings how to help other human beings with these things? Can I develop a program where someone helps someone else make a choice, help someone stretch their capacities, work through their internal resistance? A big part of our program is something called motivational interviewing, which is overcoming your internal resistance to take action. And that's what we wanted to build. And what we found in our pilot study of 1,453 clients is that we were able to increase a sense of purpose by 68% in 20 weeks. And the reason it's effective is because watching videos only gets you so far. So if you want to DIY it, we're going to give you 2 solutions in just a second. But if you want someone to help you take the actions that you need to take, then check out the program, okay? What we're going to do is teach y'all 2 techniques now to help you find purpose. Now, this comes from Viktor Frankl. So Frankl, really fascinating guy, was a neurologist who then became a psychologist, was a Holocaust survivor, and was really focused on finding meaning and purpose. He was in these concentration camps and was struggling to figure out, you know, how to find meaning and purpose and survive and all this kind of stuff. So he developed 2 really cool techniques. So what he noticed when he worked with people is that the first thing that they need to do is something called de-reflection. So de-reflection is a technique where if you look at your life, you tend to be hyper-focused on you. This is something called hyper-reflection, where everything is about you. Your boss is firing you because you're a bad person. This person is breaking up with you because you're a bad person. Everything is about you. The really interesting thing is that he discovered that if we get human beings to take a step back and think a little bit less about themselves and everything that is happening to them. Oh my God, I'm in the concentration camp and the guards are smacking me around every day. I'm hungry every day. Everything in my life is terrible, 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 terrible. This is what's so interesting, not easy to do. So what he discovered is that if I can get people to take a step back, don't focus so much on yourself. Look at the big picture. This was one of the ways that you help people find a sense of meaning and purpose in life. You start to see your life, these individual experiences, as part of a broader arc, right? This is a difficult time in my life. I'm really struggling right now, but I will come out of it. I will level up from it. This will make me stronger in the end. So what Frankl found is that if you can get people to zoom out of these individual experiences and start to look at the narrative of their life, look at the big picture, that they started to find more meaning and purpose. And a good example of this is if you've ever had a friend or if you've been dumped, right? They'll look at the life and they're like, oh my God, my life is over. The only person that I can ever love. I had all these dreams and hopes and I was going to do this and I was going to do this and we were going to get married and we were going to have kids. And now that life is over. Everything is over in my life, over in my life, over in my life. They're so hyper-reflected. They are focused on themselves so much. And what is the process of healing that, coming out of that? It's to take a step back. Hey, there's other fish in the sea. Now you have some relationship experience. Was it painful? Yes. Was it sad? Yes. Does it suck? Yes. But you have a lot of work to do. You need to start stretching your capacities, go to the gym more, start taking care of yourself, develop a life that is worth living, start to live an independent life. So as we engage in de-reflection, as we zoom out of our life, we start to find meaning and purpose. The second thing that he discovered was something called paradoxical intention. Now, this is what's really interesting. Basically, paradoxical intention is starting to look forward to the things that you dread. Okay? So weird, because there are things that we dread in life, right? Oh, I don't want to have this performance review with my boss. They put me on a performance improvement plan. I'm terrified of it. I'm dodging these phone calls from my mom asking me when I'm going to get married because I'm really struggling. We try to dodge a lot of things in life. And what Frankl noticed is that when we try to avoid things in life, the reason we're avoiding them is because we're afraid of a particular outcome. Here's the key thing he noticed. When you avoid a problem in life, the thing that you fear is more likely to happen. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So if I'm worried about the performance improvement plan and I'm avoiding that and I'm not going to work and really trying to learn things and make everything like better and really trying to shore up where my weak points are, the likelihood that I will get terminated is actually way higher. So this is what he discovered, is that he started teaching his patients to look forward to
what's good
the
on your
things
helmet?
that they were afraid of. So the way that I did this, and this is what's so interesting, is
Just making some notes, making sure that we cover this stuff. Stan Meister, then Man Meister. Oh, I'll be a Meister. When we expect a negative outcome, it's more likely to actually manifest. Okay. Maestro, Stan the Maestro Man. Nice. Yeah, you could just throw any qualifier.
Is when I was like studying in India, like we sort of have this technique too, but we called it something else. So in my case, right, it was like, okay, these are negative karmas that I have to work through. I have all this negative karma attached to my soul or whatever the fuck, who knows if any of that stuff is real. But when bad stuff happens to me, this is my negative karma that I'm getting rid of. This is something that I have to work through. This is the tunnel that I'm stuck in, and I have to get to the light at the end of the tunnel, but this is a temporary thing. Stop avoiding the problems in life. This is something that I have to work through to get to the other side. That's the way that I learned it. That's the way that I internalized it. I teach that sometimes here or there. The key thing here is to look forward to the things that you're dreading. It's not just about just doing it. It is changing your mental attitude towards things that you dread. This is something that you have to do. If you go through this performance improvement plan, you will get better. You are leveling up. This is you learning how to take control of your anxiety. This is you taking control of your life instead of avoiding the thing that you are dreading. Because remember, Frankl was all about trying to help people find meaning and purpose in life. And one of the key things he discovered was paradoxical intention. Hey y'all, hope you enjoyed today's video. We talk about a bunch.
So we could also think about that point through the lens of old Jordan Peterson's dragon, to not just go out and slay, not to go out and face the dragon, but to like courageously look forward to slaying the dragon. I'm about to write and publish an absolutely fire philosophical text that will shake the foundation of academia as we know it. Uh-oh. Who are you sending the text to? All right. So we went through that. Unfortunately, I think we got to go back to the affective neuroscience and speed run this. How far were we in? Oh yeah. Okay, we got pretty far ish. Who am I? Yeah, who are you sending to? What is this philosophical text? All right, I guess we're reading today. All of the philosophy professors and their yeesh. You've got a mail list to all philosophy professors that are out there. All right, because of our failure to fully acknowledge the functional role of... All right, this is... we got to go back to part 1 stuff now. All of them. Get the PhDs in there as well. Even people that are not yet the professors. Because of our failure to fully acknowledge the functional role of circuits constructed in our brains during the long course of evolution, we occasionally still have needlessly polarized controversies over the role of nature and nurture in the genesis of psychological processes. Yeah, and we're still talking about panpsychism in 2025. Though I think panpsychism is actually kind of maybe a growing topic, just because I think it's giving people a non-Christian, or you know, it is something that's commensurate with religion. So I mean, it's just giving people a way to think about something broader than themselves. But nature and nurture provide different things in our final toolbox of skills. Nature gives us the ability to feel and behave in certain ways, and learning allows us to effectively use those systems to navigate the complexities of the world. These tendencies are especially well mixed in those individualistic styles of thinking, feeling, and behaving that we call personality. So, funny enough, that's the next thing we're going to be talking about in the read-through. The best recent estimates of heritability of human personality using identical twins reared apart suggest that about half of observed variation must be attributed to nature, while half must be attributed to nurture. In fact, heritability is around 50% of all major temperamental variables that are measured in modern personality theory. Wow, that's actually kind of huge. And that, yeah, the crazy thing is like, yeah, 50% is based on that, and then 20, what was it? It was like 75% of people don't change their temperament by once it's by the age of 2 or after the age of 2. And I'd imagine that that remaining 25%, it's not insanely significant, but who knows? We can go deeper into that. Of course, the degree of influence for each specific trait is more lopsided. Some appear to have strong genetic loadings and others have greater socio-environmental ones. Moreover, every estimate of environmental and genetic influence varies depending on the specific cultural context in which the measures are taken. It must also be emphasized that no behaviors are ever inherited in a formal sense. The only thing that can be inherited are the potentials of bodily tissue. Wow. Yep. Well, I guess that makes sense. In a formal sense, right. After the age of 2? Yeah, no, it's... Why is that a John Calvin thing? I'm pretty sure it's pretty. You know what? I heard Jordan Peterson talk about temperament in his personality lectures, and he made it seem like it was less than 25%. I mean, 25% is pretty small, but he was making it seem like it was a larger, or a smaller group that actually changes. But yeah, no, it's a very small amount of people can change their temperament over their entire life. I do not believe that. Check it out. It's in there. It's in the literature. Temperament is pretty stable for most people after the age of 2, which is insane. So there must be a lot of yeah, I mean, obviously the development. This is why I think that it's so important. Like the first year and two of your of a child's life is like so important. Like you don't want to be screaming around them or being really in stressful situations, etc. So you're telling me the reason I'm here is because I decided it at age 2. I don't think you decided anything. The reason that you're here, well, it's just temperament. So it's not like, when we talk about temperament, I think the leading personality measure is the Big 5. So we're really not talking about too much. It's I was guided. We're only talking about those 5 traits that kind of, break down into other traits that are similar. And yeah, but that doesn't mean like your personality couldn't change. Like I try to separate personality and temperament, where personality is something more like our identity and the things that we're like interested in or focused on, and temperament's like very specific. It's our openness to, well, I mean, openness is actually quite broad and abstract. Your neuroticism, so how easily you experience negative emotion. Conscientiousness, I guess, your ability to be disciplined. I guess I don't. We can look into personality, and I think we have to look into personality for part 2, because part 2. That like these traits are things that are constraints in your life, but you can leverage those constraints, or at least learn about them, to know how you could practically move forward. So someone who's like really neurotic might want to spend more time figuring out how to deal with emotion, rather than someone who's perhaps not conscientious might need to figure out how to deal with discipline, something like that. Agreeableness, that's one of them. We got to lock up this information. Why is this? Are you noticing how controversial this type of thing could be? because that is something's up. Yeah, no, this I feel like this type of discussion is controversial, or at least, you know, it's not surprising that it could be controversial. However, it's there. It's in the science. We got to include it. But yeah. When we sometimes say in shorthand that this or that behavior is inherited, what we should actually be saying is that certain psychobehavioral tendencies can be represented within the intrinsic brain and body constructions that organisms inherit. Yeah, try saying that one. No specific thoughts or behaviors are directly inherited, but dispositions to feel, think, and act in various ways and in various situations certainly are. Although those tendencies do not necessarily dictate our destinies, they powerfully promote certain possibilities and diminish others. Thus, while basic emotional circuits are among the tools provided by nature, their ability to permanently change the life course and personalities of organisms depends on the nurturance or lack of nurturance that the world provides. In more precise scientific terms, everything we see is epigenetic, a mixture of nature and nurture. If you plant 2 identical tomato seeds in 2 different environments, you will have 2 plants of strikingly different size and overall shape, but they will still be discernibly tomato plants. There is no longer any question that brain tissues create the potential for having certain types of experiences, but there is also no doubt that the experiences, especially early ones, can change the fine details of the brain forever. Yep, this is exactly the type of discussion we have in genetics, nature, and nurture. We talk through all that. I mean, not the exact same examples here, but the same topic. Like that one researcher who studied twins who grew up at different places and literally hid his results and forbid them to be read. Wow. I legit think it's still locked up. Yikes. Do we know what he discovered? The cortical areas for body representations are encoded in some presently unknown way within the same genes of all mammals. However, a little farther down from the hand and arm area of motor and sensory cortex, we have the speech cortex, which is uniquely enlarged in humans, but whose sophisticated multimodal functions still emerge from the ancestral ability of that multimodal brain tissue to interrelate many different sensations and perceptions, and hence to symbolize complex ideas. Disregarding the complexities of underlying molecular mechanisms for the time being, which are presently being worked out at a fever pitch, and probably have been by now, since this was 1998, I think we said. The plasticity in the brain that arises from experience is conceptually not all that different from the types of change we see in our bodies as a function of use. Right. So this is kind of so we actually have the discussion of neuroplasticity coming up next after we get through the discussion of affective neuroscience, even though I need to keep reading affective neuroscience. I probably won't do that before we move on. I want to finish the Damasio book before we move on, but then I think we'll just move on to stuff that comes up in the shaping of experience major section, like plasticity. I already know someone's gonna come up and say physiognomy is true. I don't even know what physiognomy is. What is going on here? A person's facial features or expression, especially when regarded as indicative of character or ethnic origin. Oh, is this like an alternative to phrenology? It was like a facial expression version? It's just another version of incredibly speculative science. The discredited pseudoscience of interpreting a person's character and personality from their facial features. Yikes. All right, disregarding the complexities, exercise makes our muscles stronger, and with disuse, they become smaller. Still, we do not generate totally new muscles through exercise. Similarly, experience is more influential in changing the quantitative expressions of neural systems rather than their essential nature. So this is actually, I don't know if if that other book came out before this, the book, The Brain That Changes Itself, but the brain does things that muscles can't do. So like when someone, let's just say, goes blind, for example, and then they're learning Braille, like brain connections will form in the area that the connections for sight used to be, and like will actually take up that space, so that the person that is feeling Braille actually like feels that with a significantly more sensation than we can imagine, you know, feeling something with our fingers. They literally have so much more in their brain that's operating, and that's not something that muscles do. I think at such a large scale. Maybe muscles do that at a smaller scale, but I don't think it's like we can just have our. Actually, yeah, I guess this wouldn't make sense because. Yeah, it's not like if. Actually, I'm curious. Okay, so if I lose a finger, does the tendons or muscles that go down my arm, can they get used up by the other fingers? I'm guessing not, but that would be what would happen. It would be something like that, where literally the muscles that existed get taken over so that my other fingers can be stronger. Or that would be crazy. Like one of my fingers just takes the muscles from the other, and therefore it becomes incredibly strong. Yeah, I think that is where the analogy falls flat. Presumably, the same principles hold for the brain's emotional systems. On top of genetically determined vigor of the neural substrates, emotional systems can surely be strengthened by use and weakened by disuse. Unfortunately, only modest data are available on such important topics at the present time. It's a good thing that this is almost 30 years ago. I will largely aspire to provide a provisional anatomical and neurochemical overview of some of the brain systems that are essential participants in the genesis of the basic emotional behaviors. Nice. Quote unquote discredited. All it takes is one scientist to get it trending again. Yeah, I will. Maybe not even a scientist. Maybe someone like an RFK type figure. That seems to be the way to do it. Homology is a term used in anatomy to indicate genetic relatedness of bodily structures. For instance, human arms and bat wings are homologous, because they both arise from the genetic information that controls four-limb development. Although the functions have diverged markedly, one can still get a great deal of insight about the use of human forelimbs by analyzing the arm movements of any other mammalian species. On the other hand, the wings of birds and bees are analogous, serving a similar function, even though they do not share common genetic inheritance. That's pretty interesting. Okay, someone, deadass, is making videos about physiognomy with... Oh, geez. Like still? Like right now? That's kind of wild. I mean, I guess, you know, it's not the most controversial thing, but that is kind of wild. I imagine there's people like flat earthers out there and whatnot that are getting a ton of views. So, you know, it kind of checks out. In a strict sense, these are morphological terms used to discuss body structures, and they should not be used to discuss such issues as brain functions. I don't know, this might be referring to something else. However, the neuroanatomical and neurochemical similarities in the underlying behavioral control processes are presently sufficient to lend great credence to the likelihood that pervasive homologies are present in these types of basic psychoneural functions in all mammals. I'm guessing he's pointing out how like the limbic system is kind of shared. Occasional problems will arise in certain cross-species comparisons, not only because of variety in the supporting sensory and motor mechanisms, but also because of exaptations, whereby evolution has modified homologous parts for very different ends in different species. For example, the gill arch supports of fish eventually evolved into the middle ear bones of mammals. What? What? The gill arch supports of fish eventually evolved into the middle ear bone. I went to the where is the middle ear bone? I guess that makes more sense, but also it makes less sense. Yeah, that's fake. This guy's a legend in the scientific sphere. They wasn't even there. And surprisingly, terrestrial lungs were apparently converted to flotation controlling swim bladders in fish. I guess that one makes more intuitive sense, but at the present time, our scientific aim can be more profitably focused on the shared foundations rather than the many surface differences and particularities of each species. At present, it does seem likely, at least to me, that a basic form of roughhousing, play, emerges from homologous neural circuits in the brains of all mammals. But because of interactions with many other systems, play is expressed outwardly in measurably different ways. So, you know, like when we're just joking with each other, that could be a level of play. Like we're probably activating the play circuit, but it's not similar to how like dogs are running around and have to play that way. But it's a very similar, like it is sharing similar parts of the brain. They're making face readings of political figures. Oh my gosh, you can guess which ones. Oh, you're saying, yeah, that's fake. I see. Okay. They wasn't even, I thought you were referring to these scientific things. Okay. You know who else was number one? Galen, until Paracelsus came along. I don't even know either of these people, though I probably should know them. I feel like Paracelsus we just talked about. I was referring to the fish gills. Oh, okay. Galen and Paracelsus. What was that from philosophy, or is that Greek again, or? However, the detailing of differences is less likely to give us major insights into human nature than a probing of the similarities. Discussing rats given the sense of a cat. This is what I said. Discussing rats given the sense of a cat. Evolution must have put this innate stimulus for wariness into their brains, for these animals had been born in the lab and had never had anything to do with cats prior to the first test. Right, so it's like, why are humans scared of snakes and spiders? And I guess you could say it's because we saw a snake or a spider when we were a kid, but I don't know if I've seen many snakes at all in my life. So, but chances are I'd be freaked out by one still. For a while, we also had a few cats in the lab, and we now know that low doses of morphine very powerfully increase play in the presence of cat smell, but the effect is comparatively weak in the absence of anxiety-provoking stimuli. I don't even know what that means. In the absence of anxiety-provoking. Okay. Oh, okay. This is play for the mice. Okay, so when there's cats around, giving the mice morphine will make them more likely to play and not care about the cats. But if the cats aren't around, then morphine's not going to make them start playing more. Our interpretation of this effect is that some unconditioned attribute of cat smell can innately arouse a fear system in the rat brain, and this emotional state becomes rapidly associated with the contextual cues of the chamber. On subsequent occasions, one does not need the unconditioned fear stimulus, the feline smell, to evoke anxiety. The contextual cues of the chamber suffice. This, in essence, is classical or Pavlovian conditioning. Cat smell is a species typical rather than a species general fear stimulus, while pain is an example of species general fear stimulus. Okay. In short, the present view will be a reductionist one where we shall seek the sources of emotionality within the evolutionarily shared neurodynamics of the older parts of the mammalian brain. The traditional distinction between bodily and psychological processes become blurred as we come to increasingly appreciate that mental abilities are bodily functions of the brain. Right. Galen, the physician, and Paracelsus, the dog. I'm gonna keep it real with you. That's fake. I must not. I must not know the reference. All right. Conversely, I would hasten to re-emphasize some of the most important brain questions require a psychological analysis. Psychological and brain analyses must remain two-way streets. For instance, to understand the nature of the brain, we must understand emotions, but to understand the diversity of real-life emotions, we must understand the intrinsic operating systems of the brain. The reason psychology as a discipline has been so successful while generally disregarding the study of these ROM functions of the brain is similar to the reason we can be so successful in using our personal computers without knowing much about how they really work. This is how people can use part 2 of this document without having to know part 1. These machines do our bidding as if by magic, so it is easy to take their essential nature for granted. In considering the dilemma of human understanding, Pagels suggests that we need to seriously consider the fundamental correctness of the traditional materialist worldview, which has long been distasteful in humanistically oriented scholars. Most natural scientists hold a view that maintains that the entire vast universe, from its beginning in time to its ultimate end, from its smallest quantum particles to the largest galaxies, is subject to rule, the natural laws comprehensible by a human mind. Everything in the universe orders itself in accord with such rules and nothing else. Life on Earth is viewed as a complex chemical reaction that promoted evolution, speciation, and the eventual emergence of humanity, replete with our institutions of laws, religion, and culture. I believe that this reductionist, materialist view of nature is basically correct. I thought he was clowning it. And then he just says, I agree. Yeah, this is the view that we also take. And I don't know when that the interpretation of homeostasis as like a central concept really came around. Perhaps it wasn't until 2017 or, the 2010s or even early 2000s, but it's definitely after this. He then suggests that we need to seriously consider that the traditional humanist worldview, which is rather closer to traditional psychology than the materialist worldview, is also correct. Other people with equal intellectual commitment maintain the view that the very idea of nature is but an idea held in our minds, and that all of our thinking about material reality is necessarily transcendent to that reality. Further, according to this view, the cultural matrix of art, law, religion, philosophy, and science forms an invisible universe of meaning, and the true ground of being is to be found in this order of mind. I also believe that this transcendental view, which affirms the epistemic priority of mind over nature, is correct. All right, although we try to stay away from words like transcendent and transcendental, we do point out this priority. There is an epistemic priority of mind over nature. It's important to note that our notion/conceptualization of the this is me, I think, of the objective world of experience can similarly be described as empirical because of how our brain makes sense of the objects in our physical space. I don't know what I'm referring to there, but Pagels recognizes the possibility of a synthesis, and my aim here is to aspire towards such a goal, which the discipline of psychology desperately needs. These two views of reality, the natural and the transcendental, are in evident and deep conflict. The mind, it seems, is transcendent to nature, yet according to the natural sciences, that transcendental realm must be materially supported and let me just read that one again. Yet according to the natural sciences, that transcendental realm must be materially supported and as such is subject to natural law. Resolving this conflict is and will remain a primary intellectual challenge to our civilization for the next several centuries. Wow. Calling it out. Modern psychology must now seek to simultaneously deal with the issue of how environmentally acquired representations of our present world interact with the evolutionarily provided neural representations of worlds past that still exist within the genetically dictated connections and neurodynamics of our brains. Obviously, all cognitive and emotional facts that we use as specific living skills are learned, while many of the underlying cognitive and emotional potentials of the brain are our birthright. So this is the progress that Damasio is contributing towards already, making sense of how even we could consider the concepts that we understand are in the service of our own survival and well-being at obviously, increasing complexity and precision. All right, hold on. What does consider Hogwarts system mean? Where did I write that? Are you in here? Oh, the idea would be that that maybe once a month everyone gets randomly placed into a house. Maybe we get a few houses going, and then like people could do things in chat that gets their house points, and and then we have a final, like a final day where we crown the leading house. I haven't really thought too deep into it. I kind of had that idea on a whim. But yeah, I'm trying to think of things that would just make this more fun. Obviously I'm pretty confident that this idea of a little dude pushing a boulder up a hill all stream would be incredible, and it would actually be one of the things people know most about this channel if I can implement it correctly. But yeah, I think a house system would be pretty sick. Yeah, I forget what other ideas I have up there and any other ideas that I think I'm going to have. I don't know if I wrote this one down, but there's this game where and perhaps this goes into the house system, but there's a game where, let's just say there's like a discrete set of things. So I should just give the example that when I was in like a high school literature class, it might have been, I think it was a class that had vocabulary. Like we had vocabulary quizzes, and the teacher gave extra credit for this one thing. He said that you get to write one of it was maybe like 12 vocabulary words. You get to write one of the 12 vocabulary words at the top of the test. And everyone who picked the vocabulary word that was least picked got points. So that would be a ton of fun to do in this setting, like in a stream setting, where we set up a thing and everyone tries to pick the one that's going to be picked the least, and then maybe the house, like everyone gets points for the house. That would be kind of cool. And then we could also make it so that you get points for your house, you get points for yourself. We could have a whole point system here. I think it would be fun. Just gamify things. We could come up with other games. I've mentioned before, but I want to incorporate peer grading systems into, I don't know, maybe polling or just getting people's opinion on things. Like, it's pretty easy to leverage a lot of people's feedback to get like rankings, or we could do tier lists that are determined by everyone in the community. Fastest viewer to beat Silksong gets a house. How about that? Well, I don't know if I have a house to give, but also we got to be careful about cheating, because I think someone could just get a TAS. Is it pronounced TAS? TAS, and then just get a really fast score. Okay. What am I saying here? This seems somewhat controversial. For instance, our brains are designed to have a sense of causality between certain temporally related events, and also to classify and categorize objects and events in certain ways. Maybe I was using controversial in a different sense there. Controversial in the sense that it might be suspect, but yeah, no, this seems there. We need to push this basic physical notion of potential early on. How long before we introduce the experiential notion of potentiality? I didn't really go too far in all this, but we do talk about possibility early on, and then we talk about this idea of potential later on. Here we will be more concerned with the fundamental sources of the genetically ingrained affective potentials of our brains, the innate values that are elaborated by our inherited emotional operating systems, rather than the vast diversity of learning these systems can support. So, yeah, he's pointing out that this book isn't going to be about the things we learn because of the emotional systems, but really on the emotional systems themselves. So when we start talking about emotion-driven plasticity, that's, I think, the barrier where perhaps this book touches on that, but it won't touch on the conceptualizing or understanding for sure. Indeed, our understanding of learning and memory mechanisms, a main focus of modern behavioral neuroscience, will be broadened and deepened by an understanding of the basic emotional circuits that they serve. That's why we monitor them 24/7 when they're sleeping and stuff. It's legal, I think. It must be. Yeah. Yeah, I should do a 10-year YouTube video, just like Mr. Beast just did. Though it's probably going to be much less exciting. All right. Ironically, we can't consider the brain as a black box, but rather a gray box if we want to incorporate the neuroscience. Yep. Behaviorists generated a remarkable series of major accomplishments, among the most important being the general laws of learning. Because of their careful empirical work, we now have a rich description of how organisms behave in token economies that simulate capitalistic systems, and these findings have implications for areas as diverse as drug abuse. Interesting. 2, emotional operating systems and subjectivity, methodological problems, and a conceptual framework for the neurobiological analysis of affect. Ultimately, the emotional systems of the brain create mixtures of innate and learned action tendencies in humans as well as in the other creatures we must study in order to fully understand the neural substrates of affective processes. To understand the aspects of behavior that derive their organizational essence mainly from nature, we must first identify how instinctual behaviors emerge from the intrinsic potentials of the nervous system. Okay. For instance, animals do not learn to search their environment for items needed for survival, although they surely need to learn exactly when and how precisely to search. In other words, the seeking potential is built into the brain, but each animal must learn to direct its behaviors toward the opportunities that are available in the environment. This type of thing is probably this is too in the weeds to even make it to our document. It just doesn't. I mean, it would only be in a discussion of learning, which would be in the shaping of experience, but it's really not that important. In addition, animals do not need to learn to experience and express fear, anger, pain, pleasure, and joy, nor to play in simple, rough and tumble ways, even though all of these processes come to modify and be modified by learning. Evidence suggests that evolution has imprinted many spontaneous psychobehavioral potentials within the inherited neurodynamics of the mammalian brain. These systems help generate internally experienced emotional feelings. Indeed, affective experience appears to be closely linked to brain programs that generate emotional behaviors, as well as the incoming sensory experiences that result from emotive behaviors. The function of subjectively experienced feeling states may be to sustain ongoing behavioral patterns and to augment simple and effective learning strategies. So this would be slightly reductive in contrast to next to the fuller idea of homeostasis. So the function of subjectively experienced feeling states would be to not only sustain behavior patterns that are responses to these states, to promote regulation via behavior, but also to promote regulation via all kinds of stuff that we don't even notice happening. All kinds of communication between the body and the brain that result in all of our body's systems operating towards some end. Accordingly, in order to understand the neural nature of emotional feelings in humans, we must first seek to decode how brain circuits control the basic genetically encoded emotional behavioral tendencies we share with other mammals. Then we must try to determine how subjective experience emerges from or is linked to those brain systems. Considering caterpillars to butterflies, without inherited behavioral potentials, no creature could survive. Do the lower creatures feel delight and pleasure once their fixed patterns of behavior have yielded the appropriate results? Probably not, especially if the behavior is hardwired, exhibiting little response flexibility, but we may never know this for certain because their behaviors and nervous systems are so fundamentally different from ours. So I think he's making the case that if it was already just biologically based, that you would transform from a caterpillar to a butterfly, it wouldn't you wouldn't delight or feel pleasure in that, because it's the delight and pleasure wouldn't be operating for some response or function, unless of course maybe it was, right? Like maybe once you become a butterfly, a feeling of pleasure would make you go out and fly and search and explore. So the idea here being, we're not actually trying to speculate why whether or not caterpillars and butterflies are feeling a certain thing, but we're just pointing out that feelings are functional for our larger processes. All mammals, indeed all organisms, come into the world with a variety of abilities that do not require previous learning, but which provide immediate opportunities for learning to occur. Analysis of the emotional systems that control behavior is complicated by the fact that the intrinsic arousability of underlying brain systems may change in many ways as organisms age. Still, the present premise will be that emotional abilities initially emerge from instinctual operating systems of the brain, which allow animals to begin gathering food, information, and other resources needed to sustain life. I guess it's also worth pointing out, though, that culture is a really serious part of this system, where I think Jordan Peterson talks about it, where if you don't have physical touch from your parent, you just die, something like that. And I wonder if that would, I wonder if there's something so closely ingrained with the culture where, to be so close to the parent would involve picking up so much information culturally, not just, getting the development that the parent might be keeping you safe and just teaching you physical sensations. It would, I think these things would be connected in such a way where, it's good for the kid to be close to the parent so that the kid learns. As such, emotive systems mature and interact with higher brain areas where they undergo both representation and refinement. As such, okay, so this is as such that organisms learn to make effective behavioral choices. How did I mess this one up? Representation. Emotional tendencies such as those related to fear, anger, and separation distress emerge at early developmental stages, allowing young animals to cope with archetypal emergency situations that could compromise their survival. Gradually, through their effects on other parts of the brain, these systems allow animals to have more subtle social feelings and to anticipate important events and deal with them in increasingly complex ways. Others, such as sexual lust and maternal devotion, emerge later to promote reproductive success. Additional social processes such as play and the seeking of dominance start to control. This is where Jordan Peterson gets his dominance hierarchies. These start to control behavior with differential intensities during later phases of life and help promote the establishment of stable social structures and the propagation of the most fortunate and the most able. It is an understatement to say that at present we do not know how precisely affective states are generated within the brain. Primary process affective consciousness, in other words, raw fields, may have evolved because such internal states allowed animals to make better behavioral choices. So once again, this is reductive. It's only looking at what we can see the thing doing at this time, which makes sense. But now we know a lot more about these emotional states actually, and to say that they're states would also be to say that the emotions are internal states. I think is not in line with the way that Damasio goes about it. The internal states, when he talks about that, it's more of like literally what are the internals of your brain and body, and then what we get are feelings. That like raw feels, and that's almost like a quality of the signals that come from these internal states. It's the signal of the internal state, and that's the point. It's your body is literally signaling its state to the parts of the brain that create the feelings and these feelings prompt other systems that will, it's just a loop. These may be quite specific for individual emotional systems, or they may be non-specific, as reflected in generalized feelings of pleasure and aversion that are shared by several emotional systems. In either case, affective feelings help animals to better identify events in the world that are either biologically useful or harmful, and to generate adaptive responses to many life-challenging circumstances. This allows us to make an empirically justified claim that the objects of consciousness are practically significant. Okay, right. Almost. I feel like you need a little bit more there. You would need more of Damasio's perspective. In addition to responding to emergency situations, mild arousal of these brain systems presumably helps generate characteristic moods and coaxes animals to perform their everyday activities in characteristic ways. Even when there is no clear environmental reason for emotional arousal, these systems may continue to prompt organisms to undertake new activities, as in the case of exploration or play, all the while providing internal values for our life choices, internal values such as positive and negative feelings. Because of learning and the rapid development of behavioral habits, one can never capture innate emotional dynamics in their pure form, except perhaps when they are aroused artificially by direct stimulation of brain areas where those operating systems are most concentrated. yeah, I guess that's just pointing out that it's not a simple system of communication that's going on. There's a lot that contributes to your feelings at any given moment. Similar to it, how it's very complex to see all the different ways that those feelings propagate to the rest of your brain and body. Okay, what are we at? 7:22. I think I have a hard stop at 8. Nope, I have a hard stop at 8:30. Okay. I should probably just go through and just do this stuff. No Hades involved, unless I did Hades and I just did the chaos thing. That actually could work. Maybe we get off at 7:50 for that. All right, but for now, I'm gonna lower this thing down. I want to sit down. So give me 1 second. Probably should have muted for this thing. This thing's probably loud. Okay. Because of learning and the rapid development of behavioral habits, one can never... Okay, we already just read that. It is now well established that one can reliably evoke several distinct emotional patterns in all mammals during electrical stimulation of homologous subcortical regions. Typically, animals either like or dislike the stimulation, as can be inferred from such behavioral criteria as conditioned approach and avoidance. So this could perhaps be the genesis of talking about valence. So whether or not the internal state is good or bad, and that's like a fundamental concept in this whole idea of feelings being a signal of state. It's like, are things going well right now, or are things not going well right now? And that would be the correlate of positive and negative emotion. Boy, he's lowering his desk. They should add a sit down boy voice command. That's actually you probably could just do that pretty easily, or I could just get something that would be kind of hard to make the desk lower. Yep. This was a good investment, doing a standing desk. If the electrodes are not placed in the right locations, no emotional behaviors are observed. For instance, most of the neocortex is free of such effects, even though cortical processes such as thoughts and perceptions, in other words, appraisals, can obviously instigate various emotions. To the best of our knowledge, the affective essence of emotionality is subcortically and precognitively organized. All right. That being said, you could probably stimulate just the right neocortical connections areas that would. Yeah, actually, I don't know. Maybe the stimulation mechanisms that they have today aren't sophisticated enough. Also, we wouldn't know exactly which ones you would have to stimulate, because the neocortex is rather complex in terms of what thought would lead to what. But if in theory, if you could make me think the thought that things aren't good, then that would probably affect my subcortical systems as they try to do something about it. This last issue has been a bone of contention for emotion researchers for some time, but in the present context, precognitive is taken to mean that these have an internal organization so that they could, in principle, generate emotional feelings with no direct input from either unconditioned or learned environment inputs. For instance, an ill-placed tumor could generate a chronic state of emotional arousal, even though the underlying neural system is designed to be normally governed by external inputs. Although cognitive and affective processes can be independently conceptualized, it comes as no surprise that emotions powerfully modify cortical appraisal and memory processes and vice versa. The innate emotional systems interact with higher brain systems so extensively that in the normal animal, there is probably no emotional state that is free of cognitive ramifications. That's a crazy quote. I should have bolded that one. The innate emotional systems interact with higher brain systems so extensively that in the normal animal, there is probably no emotional state that is free of cognitive ramifications. And this is, just another reason why we point out that we can think about, even seeing a pen and thinking that it's real as something that is inherently emotional, and perhaps we can consider how the very idea of that fact being true is one that is emotional. Similar to how Damasio points out that gut feelings are like a literal reality, in the sense that when we consider different options, like in a decision, like what's happening is we're getting a sense of how we feel about each one. And that feeling isn't just like a rational feeling. It's like something that is, involves the signaling from our entire body, which is just insane. Clearly, there is much more variety among mammals in cortical functions than in subcortical ones. However, if those cortical functions were evolutionarily built upon the pre-existing subcortical foundations, providing ever-increasing behavioral sophistication and flexibility, we must obviously understand the latter in order to make sense of the functions of the former. The latter being the subcortical ones, I'm guessing. Right. Yeah, we as we point out in the document as well, like as the cortical functions were built out, they were built out very much in connection with all the other parts of the brain. It's not like these layers just kind of were placed on top as if this was like some cake that you make. It's like all these different parts, even though you can connect them to different evolutionary epochs, let's just say, or you could point out different functions as we share them with different ancestors or species of common ancestor. For a human, it's all very much interconnected. Concern, the most primal affective cognitive interactions in humans, and presumably other animals as well, is encapsulated in the phrases "I want" and "I don't want." These assertions are reflected in basic tendencies to approach and avoid various real-life phenomena. I don't know why I said concern here, but yeah, it's pointing out the valence of these emotions, which make us want to do something or not want to do something. Similar to how we grounded the sense of inherent intentionality in our view of predictive processing, which is another view of like homeostasis, where when we're committing to a way that the world is, there's some intention there. We're intending the world to be that way, or we're intending to act in accordance with the way that we are expecting. Those were the two different aspects there. So that could be a want or whatnot. So, but when something happens, like some prediction error that's negative valence, that could be we don't want this, but then we have to deal with it, or we don't. And that goes back to, how we started the stream, where Dr. K was talking about the effects on our brain of taking on challenges as they arise rather than trying to run away from them. However, there are several distinct ways to like and dislike events, and a proper classification scheme will yield a more complex taxonomy of emotions than the simple behavioral dimension of approach and avoidance. For instance, it seems unlikely that the dislike of bitter foods and the dislike of physical pain emerge from one and the same avoidance system. It is equally unlikely that the desire for food and the urge to play emerge from the same brain systems. As outlined in the next chapter, evolution has constructed a variety of emotional systems in the ancient recesses of the mammalian brain. To the best of our knowledge, these systems still exist in human beings as well. And that's why the abstract notion of positive or negative valence is rather powerful to generally explain that there are, positive or negative feelings. When there's probably a much more nuance, a feeling could be something that is perhaps even both positive and negative in different ways. Like it's negative in the sense that it wants this part of the brain to handle some problem, but it's also positive in the sense that it wants this other brain to capitalize on this positive thing. So there's probably nuance in the middle if I were to take the implications of the very concept of homeostasis. I should export this document into a PDF and annotate it. You could. That would be cool. I mean, any way of getting feedback would be beneficial. What do we got here? Just got recommended a video about Dennis Noble. We're about to make it out the hood. What was this? First of all, who's Dennis Noble? And was this when you were like, how does this pertain to us getting out of the hood? All right. Yeah, I'm trying to think. Like, I always have pictured people like making Reddit posts where they're like, quoting different areas, or they've got like a little excerpt. Dennis Noble is about to enlighten us. Nice. Or you. Yeah, and then get that in those annotations if you've got the enlightened perspective. And then also I was hoping that eventually people would be making like video essays or videos that point out things that they think should be changed, and then we could watch them, or we could read stuff on the channel during the stream, and we could, I could try to, consider what we should change accordingly, or how to defend certain things, because I imagine there's going to be a lot of both of that. Okay. Underactivity of certain systems may cause depression and variants of personality disorders. Overactivity can contribute to mania, paranoid, schizophrenia, and anxiety, obsessive compulsive, and post-traumatic stress disorders. Here we see that our disorderly emotional states are directly affected by the neuroscience. Thus, a physical solution may be required to ameliorate the issue. Right? Oh, was this before I had like a physical centric or a physical's foundation? Other problems such as autism and childhood schizophrenia appear to emerge from wiring problems in brain circuits. The extent to which the emotional operating systems exhibit neuronal plasticity, changes in the efficiency of synaptic connections, and dendritic arborization as a function of experience is becoming an increasingly important avenue of empirical inquiry. All right. You could bait some people, but I wouldn't recommend it. You critique Marx's philosophy and just wait. Yikes. Then, that would start our... If we could somehow, like, masterfully, get started with a toxic community and then, like, transition... Like, once we have enough people, we just keep cutting away the toxic... I think that would be pretty rough, though. I feel like we should start positive, end positive, and it probably would bode well or better for us. I don't think that's the start possible, end possible, positive, or are you saying to start negative and then end positive? That to me seems impossible, but perhaps. This isn't like mold on bread. Are you saying that you could cut off the mold on bread? It would be more like mold in bread, and then you have to throw the whole bread away, right? Underneath, the old one has already spread to the bits that look good. Yep. Yeah, I agree. I think it's got to be clean. It's got to be careful. All right, practically every brain system changes with use and disuse. For instance, the archetypal situations described in the previous chapter are the types of experiences that lead to PTSD, and it is presently widely believed that persistent neural traces of emotional traumas reflect the development of long-term sensitization in areas of the brain, such as the amygdala, which are known to mediate fearfulness. I will use the general term brain organ system, and more specifically emotional operating system, to designate the complex neural interactions that generate such inborn psychobehavioral tendencies. These systems can generate internally experienced emotional feelings and promote behavioral flexibility via new learning. Right, so this discussion made me probably more focused on this emotion-driven plasticity view, because much of part one isn't just a view about the brain and the body, but it's a view about specifically how our understanding and experience of meaning, epistemologically, how these things occur. So that's why it's really important to consider plasticity, especially as it revolves around knowledge or understanding and memory and stuff like that. Granted, plasticity is, as he's saying, plasticity is involved with a lot of systems, even the emotional systems. How did JP get famous? Well, JP got famous by first having a significant amount of content on his YouTube channel. So far, we're actually following the JP. We're following the JP system. You first get a bunch of videos, a bunch of lecture series onto your channel. Some people watch them because you do have you are a professor at the end of the day, and your students. You get a lot of students that might be interested in what you have to say. Perhaps people that were in the personality lectures wanting to hear about the maps and meaning lectures, etc. That can help you grow. So it was not that popular, but it was there were people there. And then I think it was the C16 stuff, when he made that stand with that Canada law that people point out he most likely misunderstood. Regardless, he stood up for free speech, and that got a lot of eyes on him. And I think that's how a lot of people then. So once he had all those eyes, people had something to go to, and so then they watched his lecture series, and that's where it really helped out. So he became famous from politics, kind of. Yeah, it was. Granted, once that happened, people had all the other stuff. He still had all the other stuff to show for it. So he still had his book that he spent 30 years on to show for it. So it's not like people came in politically motivated right from the start. It was he simply got exposure from the beginning, and then no, this was way I think the reason he did 12 Rules was because he had this new exposure. So he really gained the momentum from this the initial exposure, and he had actually done things. He was on TV before the C16 stuff, so he had done stuff to make his he had a lot of YouTube videos prior to this stuff. And then once that happened, then people just had stuff to see, and people were fascinated by it because it is fascinating stuff. We got to check this out. Jordan Peterson. YouTube. Okay.
You got
Latest. No, we want the oldest. Yeah. Look at this. 12 years ago. What matters? And it's a 13-minute video. Was this... I think this is like... This was filmed for something. Like maybe like a video of some kind. I don't know if it was on TV, but... Oh, look at this guy. So this is somewhere in between this time. Like this is 1997. This has to be sometime in between 1997 and the 2010s. But then after that video lecture series, he's got a bunch of just random. Well, actually, then he's got 2014 personality. He's gonna probably get his 2015 maps of meaning, which we were just watching. Then 2015 personality, I think. Yep. So he had all these lectures. I mean, these don't even have that many high views, but they're actually, some of these I guess do. The maps of meaning ones, I guess, have more viewership than personality. I guess that makes sense. Maps of meaning was kind of a... Man, why is he so close up? And so, okay, what is this? This is still 9 years ago? Oh, geez, 9 years ago is actually kind of close to where he... So what is this, 2016? So this is before the ball dropped. I think the stuff went down in 2017. So he's still not big yet. Oh, he's got an open letter to Sam Harris. What is going on here? Maybe he did? I'm not sure. But it's around this time that things pick up. I don't think that following the JP formula is going to work. You're inherently controversial and confrontational in terms of political opinion. At least I'm going to try to keep it that way. I've also just realized almost all of the philosophy tubers I know engage with philosophy from a politico-ethical viewpoint. We're going to have to concoct a new plan. Yeah, hopefully we could do this. We could do this without politics. That would be cool. What we need is something like 3 blue, 1 brown. Yeah, I think we're on the right track. So the only thing I'm trying to copy here is the idea of filling up the channel with content so people have something to see and for us to show something. Or to show that we're actually doing something, right? But we don't want to follow the same road. I genuinely think that the way to go about this is to get content here, then get exposure via collaboration, and at the same time make a ton of short form content so that people have content to see on the regular as they come in. So it's gonna be a, I don't know, it's gonna be a lot of work, and I'm gonna have to reach out to people and get in discussions that may or may not go well. We'll see. I can animate, or Alain de Botton. I don't know who that is, but can you or ethical altruism? Are these? Oh, that's the type of stuff I'm doing. Are these other just concepts, or is Alain de Botton like a channel or a person? Yeah, I think also, you know, I could be a pretty silly person, or, you know, we could go and do all kinds of things that pertain to other parts of pop culture that are more interesting than the base stuff that we do. Like, you know, I think we can leverage, you know, the fact that I'm generally interested in a lot of things to make this not be just a boring channel of, you know, of some like dense philosophy. Like, it should be pretty apparent that we're trying to, we're being playful in the very way that we're going about the trajectory here. Ethical altruism. Well, the movement. Sorry, effective altruism. I just assumed the same thing. Might be. Yeah, the effective altruism aspect of this really, like, people don't really need to know about that, but though that's probably going to be what comes up whenever anyone asks me why I'm doing this. But we'll see. We'll see what goes on. We'll see what happens. All right, what do we got going on here? 747. All right, let's speed until 750 here. I think this was it. Each emotional system is hierarchically arranged throughout much of the brain, interacting with more evolved cognitive structures in higher reaches, and specific physiological and motor outputs at lower levels. So this is slightly outdated. Like, I think this is not as held anymore. This view, it's very much interconnected, where you're seeing a lot of different parts having functions that came about because of the interconnectedness between different quote-unquote layers. I think the way that I kind of understood it is that we could think about layers only conceptually in the context of function rather than actual activation. Okay, so have you heard about the School of Life? Oh, I've not. Mr. DeBotton's project. I've not heard about this. Is this, how much does it relate to what we're doing? Or is it something similar? As depicted schematically in figure 2.2, the emotional systems are centrally placed to coordinate many higher and lower brain activities, and each emotional system also interacts with many other nearby emotional systems. Because of the ascending interactions with higher brain areas, there is no emotion without a thought, and many thoughts can evoke emotions. That's another boldable statement. Because of the lower interactions, there is no emotion without a physiological or behavioral consequence, and many of the resulting bodily changes can also regulate the tone of emotional systems in a feedback manner. All right. In simplest terms, left, emotional command system. Okay. We probably don't need this stuff with emotional feedback cross. And within this conceptualization, central executive components indicated by that. On the sagittal, depiction of an emotional system such as the one can synchronize the whole system into a coherent form of emotional responsivity. The central integration of each specific emotional response appears to be coordinated by specific neuropeptide circuits. In any event, at the present time, the lower command level provides the best organizational principles for neuroscientific inquiries. We can now be confident that a limited number of executive structures for emotionality were created in our brains by our genetic heritage, but we cannot yet be certain how many exist and how widespread they are in the nervous system. However, we can be confident about the approximate locations of some half a dozen systems, and we can approximate their ramifications in the brain using various neuroscience techniques. So I think these are the functional hubs that we talk about in communication within the brain. All right, let's put our lines here. I got to find the other one now. Nice. Was this the first one or is this the second one? This is the first one. Okay. So we should be able to find this quite easily now. And we are not making progress at all. Or this is just I think I added a lot of quotes. It's not the entire book, but it's a lot of quotes. It's a philosophy channel, hugely popular on YouTube. He also writes books, or well, I know he did, about architecture. So what does he cover? because I'm always interested in who else is in the game. Day Baton Elaine. Oh, I recognize this guy. But what's his channel? The School of Life. That's what you said. Why dating destroys your mental health. Oh, jeez. Your mind is trying to heal you by hurting you. This is literally what we're talking about, right? Kind of. Maybe we should put this in our watch later. The one question we forget to ask ourselves in love and why. So this is a little broader, but test to measure how good your father was. Yeesh. Mind how we need to make our peace with being single. Is this guy single? Is this like a pro singles channel? Why a walk in the park can save your life. All right. None of these things are... Oh, man. The dangers of missing a sense of self. Ooh. A lot of love topics. At least within the recent past. But I should probably also just do popular. Why Socrates hated democracy. Nice. The philosophy of oral sex. Nice. Karl Marx. Nice. Why you will marry the wrong person. No, oh, I've seen this. Right, I remember I've seen this guy talking about relationships. All right. I think we're gonna have to look elsewhere for some of this stuff. Yo, Darmadon, what's good? I had to read him in school, but didn't. Nice. The JP plan isn't gonna work since we're non-controversial here. But we are controversial, that's the thing. Like, part 1 literally points out that there is no objective truth. Like we can't okay, here, what's the most controversial, like, passage? Our interpretive stance. Oh. To further clarify our stance, we must also explicitly state what our framework, by its own rules, precludes. Notably, this framework precludes the possibility of achieving a transcendent, purely objective view from nowhere, because all knowledge is mediated through the predictive, embodied, and socially conditioned brain. There is no way to step outside of our own own interpretive lens. Furthermore, it precludes the idea of a final, complete, or static system of knowledge, as its core mechanism is one of perpetual dynamic learning. Furthermore, since the framework holds that all experience is necessarily structured by our understanding, it cannot claim to describe a raw consciousness. It cannot make claims about supernatural entities that intervene in the physical world. Its focus remains on the phenomenological and the scientifically plausible. Finally, it precludes a magical concept of free will that exists outside the causal nature of our biology, grounding our freedom instead within the emergent capacities of our self-conscious, predictive minds. So that's the most controversial passage, I think, in the entire document. Which would get a lot of people upset. Like, that would piss a lot of people off. But at least it doesn't say that those things aren't true. It just says that our document can't talk on it. Like, it just would break the rules of the document. So that's the way of we could be as least controversial as we say very controversial things. But that doesn't rile people up. I gotta just find I gotta find a law, and I gotta be against it for the sake of free speech. It doesn't matter what the law is. I gotta do one political thing to just pop off. I think we are gonna have that type of issue. Though, you know what? Okay, let's how about this? How about this? We've got this bad boy over here. Video ideas. And So all of these are pretty. So I've actually tagged these as controversial based on whether they are. I think this video I could do now. Rationality is emotional. We could talk like so. The idea I think. Wait, say something about the culture war. Easy. This is crazy. You're not gonna believe this. Let me tell you. Blah, 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 blah. Trust me, guys. I couldn't believe this. Yeah, these are all my thumbnails, right? This is wrong with the United States, and then we should talk about like something that's completely unrelated. That would be really funny if all my thumbnails were completely unrelated. I think the goal is going to be to talk about the same stuff that we, in a more boring way, talk about on stream in the most controversial or exciting way we possibly could. So like rationality is emotional, something like that. Maybe the name needs to change, but that would be like the thumbnail. Something that, pisses people off, like this would piss Sam Harris off. But then we talk about the science of homeostasis and how our gut is actually involved in our making decisions. Like that's the way you get people in and then teach them something really interesting and foundational about all that we're talking about. Panpsychism, I don't know if anyone cares about panpsychism, but I think they do. So perhaps we have a good discussion about that, a video about that. Yeah, we could talk about meditation practices. What is a good reason is going to be controversial, maybe, depending on, how people think about reasons. You know what I think this would be actually controversial. Solving the problems of philosophy is not going to be controversial. The impossible morality of content creators. This would be controversial for content creators, so maybe we should wait until we're bigger for that one. What were the other ones that were controversial? Laughter, its function and how we need to connect the idea of things just being funny with their implications. So we have to I want to do a whole video on the evolutionary cause of laughter, or like what its function is, how it's a function of communication, and therefore, yeah, we can make a ton of claims about laughter that I think would be rather logical. I guess we don't have too many controversials. Oh, Jordan Peterson makes it easy to be an agnostic. That would be a controversial one, and I think we could do it. But we should probably wait until he's like out of the hospital before out of needing intensive care before I start coming after JP. What else we got here? The violence of self-improvement. This one, I don't know if we're going to be able to do, just given the stuff that's been happening in the world. But critique of loyalty. Oh, this is going to be a huge one. This is similar to this is actually kind of a subset of the inherent responsibility of creators, of content creators. And the premise is going to be like, because of the influence that we know that social relationships have on your own belief systems, then content creators need to be careful about what type of relationships they have, if they're I should say moral centric content creators. So like people who are political, people who are trying to do this thing for a certain reason, like a moral reason. How many views are you aiming to get per video when everything's done, give or take, like as a baseline? He is sick again. Apparently, he got some type of mold poisoning from cleaning out his parents' attic or something, which is just wild. This guy seems to not be able to catch a break. Like a lifelong depression, and then you're starting to get just mold diseases. What in the inferno is Dante's sin? Did I say so? Oh, at some point, my master plan was actually going to be to reach out to Alex O'Connor and to collab on a video where we do a Dante's Inferno of logical fallacies. I don't know if that was in there, but I started looking through fallacies here, but there needs to be a lot of work gone into that video, and I kind of felt like, you know what, it's probably not worth my time right now. But Alex would love me. I got this. Just like show up at his door and give him an embrace. To answer your last question though, how many views am I aiming per video? I couldn't tell you. I don't know what the trajectory is going to be like. I could just, you know, I've said it before. There's like a few things going on here. One, I've got nothing else that I think is more important than this, so I'm going to be doing this until I die, unless I think that there is eventually something else that's more important. So as far as the eye can see, I'm just going to keep working on this until it blows up. The second thing, give me a number. I'm an ambitious guy, so the sky's the limit here. The question's going to be the clash between this type of content and like what's the ceiling of this type of content, and I really just don't know. Like I would look up you know, what is Dr. K getting right now, and boom, we're going for these numbers. These are the number. This is the goal. Yeah, and I'm generally like, you know, especially with like someone like Dr. K, like obviously I'm not as qualified as Dr. K. That said, I'm also providing things that Dr. K couldn't provide because he's not in the philosophy space. But once again, I feel like we're compiling gold. Like we're trying to figure out so many things. Like a lot of research has to go into this. We're aggregating a lot of information that people already find useful, and that's what we're bringing forth. It's not like we're bringing forth a ton of like unique ideas, except for perhaps some of the philosophical stuff as we're combining things. But yeah, we're just packaging up useful things, like things we already know to be useful, and then we're gonna just once again, we're selling people gold for free. So I wrote it down on a whiteboard: 10 million, go big or go home. Sure, let's do it. And then also, like I feel like you know, I'm pretty confident about my creativity. If things were to go really well, like I could come up with a ton of ideas to collaborate with people to do things that aren't even related to this content. I think I mentioned it before that the goal is to kind of at some point separate myself from a broader community of self-help. And when I say separate myself, not to like separate what I'm doing, but separate my name from the broader community. And then my name can be related to the fun stuff we do on YouTube, or, you know, collabs, doing gaming, doing whatever, yoga streams, cooking streams, workout streams, whatever it's going to be. What if you started appearing on small podcasts? I think that's the key. I think that's what we want to do. I think the way to get exposure in the beginning here is going to be to collab, to get on people's channels, to just literally like basically what we're doing right now, what we've been doing for the past year is training. Like it's all just me internalizing things, and I'm still not trained enough. Like, but I'm probably trained enough to actually go onto a podcast and say something. It's just not going to be the most elegant way of saying it, and that's what I got to work on. But yeah, that's the plan. And then I don't remember how recently I said it, but yeah, the goal is to have content for people to go to when they are intrigued from. I can scout some for you. I'm curious. The thing that I need scouting for is which other content creators I should reach out to, which we've kind of failed during our Friday streams to find other content creators that are both like at a similar size, but also doing something somewhat similar to us. And yeah, I guess we should just keep looking and, you know, find whoever. And then at some point, like, we're going to have, like, eventually we'll actually finish part 2. And, you know, even after that, we'll finish part 3. If no one's around by part 1, part 2, and part 3 being done, then at this point, I could just start sending the entire document to larger content creators until someone budges. And just be like, hey, I figured out a really nice way of going about self-help and all this stuff. Check it out. Here's a shortened version if you're interested. And I think there would be a bite for that, and that could jumpstart the channel. So I'm embracing this idea of overnight success that could come from growth at any which time. But it is very motivating to see the natural interest from literally just being on Twitch and people just coming in here out of happenstance without any marketing. So granted, it's not like a ton of people, but if we start getting a slight momentum, I think that the retention here would be pretty great. That is, if we keep up with interesting stuff in the streams and not reading affective neuroscience text. But the growth is something that could wait. We have to do the real stuff now, which is making sure that the content is sound and right. So, all right, I think I'm gonna do a really short Hades stream. I only have 20 minutes, so worst case, I literally stop mid run, but I'm only gonna do one of those chaos things, whatever those are called. Me, you, and Dom podcast while skydiving on a plane in swimming shorts. I'm gonna try find you some smaller philosophy content, homies. Yeah, that would be great. That's going to be like, I'm going to need just like a list, and then I'm going to, maybe once a week, reach out to one of them and just see if anyone's interested. Or maybe if the marketing strategy is to go crazier and just reach out to a bunch. I'm not sure. I don't want to have scheduling conflicts. I still have a job, so it's going to be somewhat difficult. And I should probably put in due diligence of like looking up what the type of content they have is, so I know what they're interested in, so that I could be a personable human being. See what hit rate you get. Yeah. I'm just curious how many people would just be generally interested given the stuff that we're working on. And yeah, we'll see. It'll be fun. All right, I'm gonna start up the stream in like a minute. I just need to switch over to the other VOD. So BRB.